Well, good evening, everyone. It looks like we're waiting on a couple of board members to still join. Seth and Nikki, I think we're still waiting on. Robin, you have your hand up? Oh, there's Seth, I see you. Robin, you have your hand up?
I do. I was just going to move approval of the agenda after you call the order.
Okay, yep. I need to get going here first. Excuse me here. I'm just checking to see. We're still waiting on David and Nikki. So we'll call the meeting to order here. It is 5:30. This is the regular meeting of the Fargo Board of Education for Tuesday, October 26th. And before I call for approval of the agenda, and Robin, I'll call on you. I saw your hand up. Before I call on approval of the agenda, though, I am going to make a few comments. And these are comments that board members and cabinet members you will have heard already because they are reflective of the email that I sent out to those of you on October 21st regarding the October 12th board meeting, which is our most recent board meeting. The reason I'm making these comments tonight is to reiterate to all of you and to us, including myself, what those were, and also to let members of the public know that may be listening, that may have contacted us regarding our last board meeting, having questions and concerns about it. And so I am going to read the comments overall that I sent through, not quite all of them, but most. This is how the email started out. I have received communication from constituents, board members, and members of the district's administration regarding the October 12th meeting. I have taken the time to review the pieces of communication as well as my notes, and I watched the meeting on YouTube. I also visited with many of you regarding various details of the meeting. First, I want to, for myself, say that if I had the opportunity to run that meeting again, I would have done it differently. There certainly were points during that meeting where I did not feel like I was the best in terms of my leadership, and I apologize for that. And I intend to put steps together to make improvements. And I think we can all do that. We moved through the agenda. We got our business taken care of that we needed to, but I hope that we can all agree that there are some things that we could have done differently. I encouraged us to look at policy GP10, which is our board member covenants. I encourage us to continue to pay attention to that, and I'm mindful myself to do that, and that we're all elected to do the same work, no matter how difficult it is for all of us, no matter if we agree or disagree, we are all elected to do the same work. And just, again, looking for us to honor the process of that work that we need to be doing. So tonight during our meeting, I want to say that in terms of working to acknowledge individuals, that board members that would like to speak, I think it's best if we can try to speak one at a time so that we're not speaking over each other. So I intend to look for the hand raised in your screen first. That doesn't mean that if you're raising your hand or waving your hand, I won't call on you, but I will work first to see who has their hand raised electronically in the screen. And I'm hoping that that'll help us move through our agenda a little bit better. And with that, I will ask if there is a motion for approval of the agenda. And Robin, you had your hand up. Go ahead, Robin.
Sure. I move approval of the agenda with the HR addendum.
All right, Seth?
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second for approval of the agenda. Any discussion? Jennifer? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Sorry, I need to unmute you. Sorry. I would like to request that we move memo 47 down to business item. So D.
Okay, there's been a request to move memo 47 to business. Is that all right with Robin and Seth? Robin's nodding. Seth, how about you? Okay, we will move that then to the last item under business. All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, our agenda has passed. Two individuals have signed up to address us this evening under recognition of the audience. And the comments that I need to read will follow. I want to mention that there is a slight update in our comments to be read. That main update is that while we do ask you to sign up prior to speaking at the meeting, including your mailing address, when you are speaking to us in our board meeting, you do not need to indicate your street, your mailing address to us. You simply need to indicate your home school district for our record. So here are the updated comments. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and home school district for the record. Speakers must refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond or debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 5 minutes. Upon conclusion of that allotted time, a chime will sound and you will be asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying your final time at the podium. And the first person that signed up to speak to us is Cassie Schmidt. So Cassie, please go ahead. Do we know if we have Cassie joining us? And Anne-Marie, do you happen to know if Cassie's on?
She's got her hand raised.
She is there.
All right. Hi, Cassie.
She should be able to speak.
Okay. I was just going to ask to see if there's any advice from our tech team on helping out here.
There should be a message on, she just disconnected. Do you want to maybe go to the second one and we can try to circle back?
I can do that, sure. Cassie, we'll go to our second person and then I'll come back to you. So, and Kristen, are you on? Kristen Charbonneau?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Kristen Charbonneau, I have children that attend Carl Ben and Fargo South. At the previous board meeting on October 12th, I requested a formal response to how the school has determined that they have the authority to make medical decisions for my children and other students in the district. I appreciate your response, but it has left me with more questions than answers. Your response is that the North Dakota Century Code 15.1-09-50 subsection 8 gives the authority to mandate masks. North Dakota Century Code 15.1-09-50 subsection 8, which by the way only pertains to Fargo Public Schools, states to have the control and management of the public schools within the boundaries of the district and from time to time to adopt rules for their good order, prosperity, and utility. This states from time to time, which implies that it is not indefinite. I am formally requesting the school board to provide a response to the question of what is the specific plan? When will the masks be removed? What criteria are you using to determine when they will be removed? And what other options have you explored? How is this mask mandate providing prosperity? According to the definition by Webster, prosperity is the condition of being successful or thriving. How is this mask mandate providing prosperity? I would also like a written response to that question. The Webster definition of utility is the quality or state of being useful. I would like a formal response to what specific data, including the co-founding factors, are being used to support your position that within Cass County, masks are useful. The numbers within the county between the school districts indicate that masks are being more harmful. West Fargo has continued to have fewer active cases of COVID within the school than Fargo. I have one more question. If you believe so strongly in the masks, why have most of you who have continued to vote keeping the mask mandate been observed out in our community without masks? I find it outrageous that you are forcing this on my children and not willing to comply yourself. Your actions speak louder than your words. If you believe that the masks were for the good of the order, providing prosperity and utility, you would be wearing them every time you are in public. Remove the masks off my children. I am formally stating that you do not have my consent to put a mask on my children or provide any other medical care for them.
Thank you, Kristen. Cassie, are you available? Go ahead, Cassie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. I had to run to a different spot. Good evening. My name is Cassie Schmidt of the group Let Parents Decide That. As far as the homeschool district, I'm representing thousands of parents in the Fargo area, so I guess that would vary. First of all, tonight on behalf of our group, I would like to thank Jennifer Benson and David Paulson for being a voice for those of us that do not agree with mandated abuse to children and staff. I'd like to address this board and its complete lack of leadership and professionalism for the last meeting. I watched it and was appalled by the utter disrespect that was shown to Jennifer Benson, as well as the body language and actual language used by our elected members. Eye rolling, slumping in your seats, walking out of the room, laughing, not very professional. Add to that the use of expletive language, and it's surprising to me that this is actually a group of adults who are set to oversee the education of children. No, we don't need a gavel, but it sometimes seems that many of you could use an education in manners and meeting etiquette. I'm sorry if this discussion is getting old for some of you. I can understand the frustration, as there's obviously very important business to discuss, such as FPS districts, student achievement dropping 20% in the last 5 years. Just relinquish parents and personal rights regarding these medical decisions, and you won't have to hear about these annoying masks anymore. If you think talking about them is getting old, please imagine being forced to wear them as a child for 7 hours a day. You can hide behind the Zoom meeting all you want, but we see you out in public, making your own choices. We can see that when you each have the choice, whether to mask or not, most of you choose not to. And what does that tell us about you? If you only participate when it's required, obviously you don't believe masks are safe and effective. I was disturbed to hear our resident scientist trying to muddle the facts of the matter at hand. We could talk about confounders and the role they play in a case study, but in this real life situation that was never meant to be a case study, I'm having trouble understanding what the percentage of uninsured students has to do with whether or not we have positive cases in each school, because she said factors like that are extremely important. How? Let me ask you this. Does wearing a mask prevent you from getting infected with COVID? The answer is no, because as of 4 days ago, Fargo had 112 cases, West Fargo only had 75 cases, and the only difference between the two is that one had a mandate and one did not. The reporting is the same as last year. West Fargo has 789 more students, but 37 less positive cases. Masks don't work. They're being used under the guise of preventing or mitigating the spread of an illness. Fargo Public Schools are mandating the use of a medical device to students and staff without consent or a medical license, sidestepping parental and personal medical rights. This is criminal behavior. and the long-term effects of which are unknown. Let parents decide that is calling on the Fargo Board of Education to drop the mask mandate for students and staff and to go back to in-person meetings. We further assert again that you do not hold the authority to force participation in medical intervention for employment or attendance. And we're calling on students and teachers to make their own decisions, and parents for the students to make their own decisions when it comes to medical intervention. Please do not comply. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the reports section of the agenda. The first report is a Dakota High School report. Dr. David Berkman, you are here to introduce this. Welcome.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Are you able to hear me nice and clear?
Yes.
All right. Very good. I'm going to jump on a screen share, and am very, I'm going to say energized, enthusiastic to share the senior survey data from Dakota High School. So in the board packet that you have, I'm going to just be highlighting on a few of the pages. As you can see, we have a new name and we have our new logo in place, which is appearing in all of our communications. Briefly on the page in the board packet about why students come to Dakota High School, there is no one single answer. We are a high school that has a full range of students making the choice to come to Dakota. All right, first stop at senior survey. When seniors do graduate, they complete their senior survey, and feeling safe at school and respect, you can see our 4 years of trend data. That would be agree or strongly agree responses. Students at my school feel safe each day at school, and other students at the school treat me with respect. Next page covers some more of our senior survey results. And again, you can see some consistently high numbers for our last 4 years, consistent as well as consistently strong. All right, briefly on this page, explaining our schedule. What's different? We're alternative education, and we only have 2 periods per day, so students focus on 2 classes at a time. And instead of semesters, we are grouped into what is known as the 6th semester, which is 29 days of a very large super block. Your next page, just highlighting that we're very glad to get back to volunteering, which is an integral part of life at Dakota High School. So it is nice to see COVID slowly disappearing in the rearview mirror and us able to return to doing activities that we do find a lot of value in. Next page, talking more results from our senior survey. Teachers have high expectations for me at 95. Teachers encouraging me to set goals, steady at the 97. Teachers expecting me to do my best. High quality education program, and then ready for the real world. And once again, consistent data from year to year. Looking at the profile at Dakota High School, we had 40 graduates in the previous school year. And you can see that asterisk at the bottom, that 87.5% of our graduating class last year had spent 1 year or longer at Davies North or South. And that remaining 12.5% would have been out of district students who came to Fargo and came directly to Dakota High School. Quick look, we've had 2 graduates so far this year. Since we are alternative ed, when a student finishes that last class, they are able to be done. And we have had 2 graduates so far, and I think we'll be having 1 more this week. And a couple of pictures of our informal graduation ceremony. Next page in your packet, looking at demographics for the last 4 years of our graduating classes. And I think you can see in 2021 that we had a 45% in terms of ethnicity, white graduates, and 55% made up of students of color. Formal graduation ceremony. We are slated this year for Friday the 21st, and we think we'll be outside again because it's been popular with students and parents. Looking at the graduates through the years, somewhere between 40 and low 60s, low 70s one particular year. And at the bottom of this page, what do our graduates do? Same thing that Davies North South or Moorhead or Cheyenne High School do. They do work, military, 2-year school, 4-year school, and we'll be seeing some of that data on the next slide. So asking this class of 2021 what their plans were, I think there was definitely an increase in uncertainty, definitely COVID motivated. We do have a team goal this year of this other plans or didn't answer to explore that uncertainty and to continue to provide students guidance in terms of COVID or no COVID, what options are out there for them. Next, kind of wrapping up the Dakota piece, we do like to share our SIP goals with you. Those are school improvements. Those are from the Cognia Corporation. And really, as you're looking at those senior survey data questions, and then you see what our school goals are, the correlation is quite strong, where we're able to see the results that we are getting each year. Choice ready, I'm guessing you all have seen quite a lot of this particular chart, and we will continue to see more of the choice ready. Our first school improvement goal, school improvement plan, is that we will have students earning accolades. That's staying on a graduation pathway with a 2.8 GPA or higher. And as you can see through the years, we continue to raise our mark at how many students we are wanting to achieve accolades and how many mentors are helping students cross that pathway. Yes, a COVID dip. We are in recovery mode on that goal. Our second advisory goal, our second SIP goal is our advisory program for credit. And our research is showing us that at the bottom of our data page, 90% of our students who work closely enough with an advisor to earn a half credit remain on a successful graduation pathway. It is a powerful intervention, and research nationwide would support that the value, the strength in having this adult mentor in a student's life. And again, COVID caused some rumbling of that because it's a lot of face-to-face meetings that we're glad to be back into this year. Our SIP goal number 3 are the number of Algebra 2 engagements and completions at Dakota High School, Algebra 2 being a gateway class for college. And once again, looking at a COVID dip, and Algebra 2 with their distance learning was a challenge for students. Finally, SIP goal number 4, volunteering at Dakota High School, is integral to who we are, finding that sense of purpose, that making impact in life. And you can see our service learning goals throughout the year. And I'm going to hit stop share as we're looking at a picture of our outdoor graduation ceremony and welcome any questions from the board regarding Dakota High School and senior survey.
Okay, thank you. Any board members have questions at this time? If you put your hand up electronically, that helps. I don't see any hands up. Oh, I do now. Okay, Nikki and then Jim. Go ahead, Nikki.
Thank you, Rebecca. Dr. Berkman, I just wanted to say thank you so much for providing a great report, a great overview. The numbers are impressive as to how the kids feel about being in this environment, and that's hats off to you and your team. Just really appreciate that. I think that's really great, and I appreciate you sharing that and bringing that to us as well. I think it's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, David, just one quick question on the advisory mentor program. I get the fact COVID impacted everything in the district, but it looks like we have only 8 staff members that are doing mentoring this year. Is that just because we're early in the year and kids haven't really signed up yet, or do you expect those numbers to increase?
All of our Dakota staff are advisor/mentors. So the number 8, I'm not sure which page it's coming from, but I can explain where we're at, which is everyone from our head secretary to our IT person to actually me. Some students are I guess we'll call it lucky enough or unlucky enough to have the principal as their advisor mentor, but we all are advisors to a student. That allows us to get the number of students per staff member down to a much lower number.
Yeah, maybe I didn't frame the question correctly, David. And you're looking at the right chart. That was the one I was looking at. So from what I could see, 9 students have qualified for the half credit, but I'm assuming there are many more students that are working towards that. Am I correct? Because that's not a complete year.
Yes, 100% are working towards it, and 9 students last year were able to cross that line.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thanks.
All right, David, go ahead. I should say David Paulson.
Yep. David, thank you again for your report. I've told you before, and I'll reiterate, this is my favorite school in the entire district. Almost everybody can find his place at Davies or South or North, but your school is so unique and it provides a place for kids that just don't quite fit in and desperately want an education. And I'm so happy that this school continues to be successful. The question I have for you is, and I've asked you this in the past, do we have a waiting list now, or are we completely full, or what is the status? And thanks again.
Thanks for the supportive words, and actually thanks to school board and district leadership. Davies North and South, 3 fantastic comprehensive high schools, and it is great that we're able to offer an alternative for when that isn't working for a particular student for a particular reason. As far as a waiting list, right now we're sitting at about 90% capacity, and we are able to take any student who's ready to start with us. So no waiting list at the moment.
Robin?
I agree with David, but thank you for all the other David Paulson. I really appreciate your work. I would also like to emphasize this is a school of choice. And if that could be added to a tagline somehow, because it is indeed, students choose to go there to succeed. And you are the crown jewel of our district. And I'm very proud of the work that you do and the success our students find within that program. So I'm not a marketing person, but school of choice sounds like a great tagline.
Thank you.
Any other board members with questions? David Berkman, the mission of the school remained steady from the change from Woodrow Wilson High School to now Dakota High School. I'm curious if you have any, is there a highlight that you would like to share that maybe something that stands out in your mind as the name transition took place and as the opening ceremony was held? Is there anything that that is a highlight that might you see have evolved because of that process, or anything that's been shared that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair question, because the board, of course, last year went through the decision-making process and your new board policy and matrix of name change, and we were the first school that did undergo the name change. I think what's most noteworthy to me is the wide scale support from our Native American community, celebrating that Fargo Public Schools took time to pause and say, okay, we did choose this name Dakota for our new school, but we're actually going to trace it back and celebrate the original people from the area. And we really want to elevate that celebration. In conversations with Melody Stabner, Indian Ed coordinator for Fargo and West Fargo, she's just very, very optimistic and thankful for the recognition that was given to an Indigenous people, to the Dakota people. And our opening ceremony on September 15th was very largely successful thanks to that Indian Ed team and the collaboration. So feel very good about energizing, celebrating our North Dakota roots in the renaming of the school. And that positive energy extends all the way across the state. It's not just in and right around Fargo, but extending to across the whole state and region.
Thank you for sharing. All right, let's move on to the next report. And David Berkman is also going to be introducing that one, and that is the English Learner Program Report. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. You guys are going to get tired of hearing my voice tonight, I think. All right, doing a share screen again. I'm doing a quick pause on page 2. It takes a team, and the team that you see posted serving right around 900 students. You're seeing district level, IT team, summer school, teacher leaders, the course captains, some great leadership from our superintendents as well. So when you're seeing EL, just understand that it is a very comprehensive leadership team. On the next slide, worth highlighting is that there's some new WIDA standards that were released in 2020. And Department of Public Instruction is taking what I would call a stronger stance in terms of districts documenting that they are implementing the standards not only in EL classrooms, but in general education classrooms as well, is part of Title III. So some new standards coming out with I think it's, I don't know, a 270 page manual to go with it. And then also on qualifying for EL, the state lowered their composite proficiency level from a 4.5 to a 3.5, which means students with slightly weaker English skills would no longer qualify for EL. So the state slightly lowered that bar. This next slide might be most noteworthy from the presentation tonight. Some EL noteworthies of the past 15 months. Our families have told us that it was very good last year to get back together face to face. The interrupted learning with the 2 days on, 2 days off, which was necessary mitigation strategies, proved an extra struggle for our English learners and their families. So they were very grateful to have the second semester last year to be full steam ahead. Summer school, a lot of successes that were shared as part of the summer school board report. And then just pausing a moment on these ESSER funds, our superintendents, district leadership have been supportive, and all of the items you see listed here for innovations in EL because of the ESSER funds would have went through that approval process through the superintendent. So we've got extended learning lab materials, take-home books for K-8, some nice strong reading intervention programs with RAS Plus. Rosetta Stone we have not had for several years because the pricing was very high. They came down and ESSER funds were available, so we have some licenses to share. The EL family nights, I would encourage you, once we get these started up, to come join one of these. Mid part of the city on the first and third Tuesdays from 5:30 to 8, full family EL family night. And then on second and fourth Tuesdays in the further southern part of the city, likely at Ed Clapp, 5:30 to 8, education for the whole family. It starts with a family meal provided through a different grant because food is not available within ESSER grants. So excited to get that started. Staff are just coming on board with that. I would hope by Thanksgiving time, these are family nights are moving forward. K-12 EL tutoring on board. And then in the Journey article coming out next week, we have some EL family liaison positions where we will start to announce, for example, a Spanish-speaking liaison district-wide. If a Hispanic family is having questions, concerns, would like a liaison to help them problem solve with the school. The position's intended for both school, family, and student success. So you'll see some of those positions coming out as well. What I especially like about our approach with this is we're taking existing bilingual support staff, existing already, and we're going to add some hours to the weekly schedule and some training so that they can be successful in these new roles. So summing up this slide, we're excited to be rolling out some innovation with some new dollars coming into K-12 through ESSER. Next slide, you can see the languages spoken. 87 of them we've grown up to. And a pie chart of those languages. The flow chart, 2 pages, is just qualifying and exiting EL program, federal Title III. Once again, the team looking at the teachers and support staff, EL teachers and EL support staff, great team of highly committed individuals that are a pleasure to work with. All right, looking at our enrollment data, currently 964 EL students have been served this year, representing 60 countries, and it's about 7.6 of our overall enrollment. The slight muddy part is definitions of refugee, immigrant. 54% of our students in EL were born in USA. 27% are somewhere between refugee status and immigrant status. It's not once a refugee, always a refugee. And if looking at the next page, which is very text dense, that explanation of, well, within about a year or so, refugees start to move towards that immigrant status. And that shift isn't always super clean. So looking at previous slide again, of our current EL students, 54% born in the USA, 27% were identified as refugee status and now are moving towards immigrant status, and 19% were originally immigrant status. Bottom of this word dense page explaining immigration is that Lutheran Immigration Resettlement Services is projecting about 300 to 500 new arrivals in Fargo in the next 12 months. The majority of them will be placed in Fargo, and that would be Fargo School District and West Fargo schools. And that 300 to 500 represents complete families. So it might be an 82-year-old grandpa, and it might be a 6-month-old infant. The next page looks at the numbers through the years. The far right side are January polls for our EL enrollment, who was active in school at that time. And then you can see how our numbers have progressed from January of 2020 through October of 2021, kind of that yellowish highlighted column in the middle. Noteworthy, all of our 23 sites have EL students. All right, new arrivals I had already mentioned. There's the historical data from what used to be LSS, now is LIRS, and refugee resettlement in Fargo. And then just very briefly on EL Direct Services, based upon students' language proficiency, how many units of EL should the student be receiving? The lower their language proficiency, the more units of EL service the student receives. WIDA, again, is the consortium that we belong to. And you can see the number of students who do the annual testing in January to determine their comprehensive language proficiency and the number of students exited. I did leave up the data from 2015, 16 to 16, 17, because nationwide there was this abrupt drop in number of students exiting because the test went online and it was made markedly more difficult to pass. And we had been building up steam with more students exiting, and you can see from COVID that we took a bit of a dip again in number of EL students exiting. Learning English, 1 to 3 years. Cognitive, 5 to 7 years. And then just a brief conversation on our levels. Elementary EL services, mostly pull out, 3 to 9 students per group. We currently have 460 elementary EL students. Some of the curriculum that they use. Middle school, we have about 210 students, and instead of the pullout for language instruction, we have sheltered classes in English, reading, math, and social studies, as well as resource. Some of the resources used by middle school EL teachers. And high school also similarly about 210 students. And once again, it's sheltered classes. Students are pulled out for the full course. High school EL, the students are still required to have the same number of credits to graduate. So they do need 4 core English, 3 math, 3 science, and 3 social. So these classes for pull-out EL instruction relate directly towards completing high school in 4 years with a high school diploma. It's actually the same standards as well. So if you're taking EL Western Civ, the EL teacher collaborates with the gen ed teachers, and it's the same exact standards. They have just trained to have the language barrier be far less of an impact in the student showing their mastery of the standards. And some of the tools used in the high school EL. Summer school, this would be a repeat from our summer school presentation. Continues to be a strong opportunity for students. And final, second to the final page talks about our goals, which have not changed in the last 5 years. Our 23 sites, 27 teachers. We want to support strong EL family dynamics and American culture, and really a drive towards family literacy, whole family literacy. And with that, I will hit stop share and be happy to take any questions on the K-12 EL program.
All right, thank you. Brian, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Nice job, Dave. How come those resources are picked?
How come which resources aren't picked?
No, how come those resources are picked? Why did they pick those resources?
Oh, I see. Like for like the curriculum that they'd be using in elementary, middle school, or high school?
Correct.
Correct. The National Geographic curriculum was brought on board 6 years ago. So it went through a vetting process of what would be some strong K-8 EL curriculum. As far as the reading A to Z, RAS plus EL, that would be directly from the EL teachers saying we would like to use this as a supplemental. So teacher and research driven. And it's always evolving. If teachers are looking for a new resource, we start to explore it.
Thank you.
Tracy, I think your hand was up, and then Robin. Go ahead, Tracy.
All right, I don't seem to have the electronic option tonight to raise my hand. So thank you so much for this presentation. 87 languages served is really, really something incredible. And I appreciate the EL family nights. It sounds really great. And I also appreciate your creative use of grants to get food there, even when ESSER dollars don't approve that. When you were initially talking about the DPI kind of changing with the WIDA standards and stuff with Title III, you said the proficiency level was decreased from 4.5 to 3.5. Do we know if that affected the number of students in our district that were able to receive services? And if so, how many?
Anecdotally, I can just speak. I don't have the data readily in front of me, but anecdotally, I know we've had at least 2 or 3 students who have been new to district that we have screened, where the new criterion, they did not qualify for EL services. However, though they didn't qualify, that student remains on that building and the EL team's watch list, if you will, because though the student didn't qualify screening, if we're seeing lower, I'm going to say lower than average performance, lower than average grades, it can be revisited. So 2 to 3 for sure off the top of my knowledge.
Thank you. If I may, Rebecca, just a follow-up. Thank you for that. That's really encouraging to hear that it was so low. But and then also with your projections of the 300 to 500 families, I mean, I think you put up a slide that doesn't seem too different from previous years. Is there concern about our capacity to handle that, or are we feeling like we're in a good spot?
We're in a good spot to be able to handle it. And if we had I'm going to say a bubble in a particular school, I would talk with the superintendents and put a request in for additional staffing, which has happened in previous years. So if current staffing couldn't cover, we would look at where we would need to put new staffing, even in mid-year.
Robin, go ahead.
Thank you for the report, David. I remember just a couple of years ago, I think we had 64 different languages spoken in the district. So I think that is some significant growth. I have a diploma question. And if you can't answer it, maybe Dr. Gandhi can. Are we offering a distinction, if you will, on diplomas for learning a second language? And how does that work for our English language learners? Do they have the same distinction on their diplomas?
I can talk, unless Dr. Gandhi wants to go.
Go ahead, I can chime in after.
Okay. The EL students would qualify for the North Dakota Seal of Biliteracy. And for them, it's the challenge is to find the proficiency test in the native languages. So for example, somebody from Nepal who develops proficiency in English came with proficiency in speaking Nepali. The challenge is to find that proficiency test within that other language. The more common, I'm going to say, Western languages of French, Spanish, German, there are existing tests that our foreign language teachers are able to give. So yes, they are able to pursue the North Dakota Seal of Biliteracy at silver or gold. And our challenge is to find a test that would be accepted for measuring proficiency in their native language.
Thank you.
Dr. Gandhi, did you have something to add?
Nope. Mr. Berkman was able to cover it. I would just add that when the North Dakota Seal of Biliteracy was introduced, I do believe Fargo was the first and only district in the first year to be able to apply for that and have graduating students. And we have had students every year since then.
Okay, thank you for the very, very detailed, interesting reports. We will close out that section then and move on to the FEA report. Lynette, welcome.
Thanks. Well, good evening, everyone. I am Lynette Chrisman. I am a middle school counselor at Ben Franklin Middle School and the FEA treasurer. And hopefully I don't lose you because it's really windy out here on the farm by Kindred. But on behalf of FEA, we just wanted to say that we're continuing to work on the Memorandum of Understandings. And just wanted to wish all administrators a happy Principals Month because their month is wrapping up.
Thank you for being here, Lynette. Have a good night. Dr. Gandhi, your superintendent's report.
Yeah, I wanted to start this morning or this evening by first saying Biju Rupak Nanijnika. This is earlier today, actually later today on your consent agenda through the HR addendums. You are going to be approving the cultural specialists that we've hired for our district, and they were fortunate enough to work with us already in our administrator training this morning on just around some of the work that we're doing around diversity, equity, and inclusion within our district. And one of the conversations we had this morning is just the importance of being able to greet someone from their native language and the feeling of inclusivity it shows within our district. All of our administrators made a commitment to use what they learned this morning in some sort of setting to make someone feel inclusive. So that's why I wanted to start that. But I also wanted to start with that greeting today by just because I want to highlight some of the work that we are doing as a district, specifically Dr. Usselman and I are, and the difference between diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and then the perceptions of CRT that are happening as well. So as we have started in special session legislatively in North Dakota, anecdotally, we're being told that there's tons of CRT bills being introduced as well. I am part of the North Dakota Council of Educators Leaders focus group and just want to be fully transparent that Fargo Public Schools does and will support any legislation banning CRT, critical race theory, and what it does. That's not part of our curriculum. It is not part of our current practice or aligned to North Dakota Century standards. However, we would be opposed to anything that limits the work that we do on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Similar to how I started the staff report, the work that we do around diversity, equity, and inclusion within our school district is to make sure that we are promoting an inclusive environment for all learners. It is not promoting divisiveness between any two learners that may or may not represent a marginalized population. So I think it's important to draw that distinction, especially as we go into potential implications and advocacy at the state level to recognize what the work is that's happening in our district and what the work isn't. So doing things to create more inclusive environment or being able to give our administrators and our teachers skill set to make sure that all students can learn at high levels does not create the divisiveness that critical race theory may or may not, and critical race theory is not something that we're doing in our district. So I wanted to just highlight an example of some of the work that we're doing and what our position will be, because as Robin can tell you, that even in special session, things start moving fast and furious. So if you see Fargo Public Schools kind of taking a position legislatively or working on certain things, that's what we're going to do. We will support DEI work, but we would also support recognizing that CRT is not part of the K-12 curriculum, and those two things can be different, and they are. So it's important not to mix those things together. So wanted to start with my superintendent update with that. And then the second piece will just be continuing kind of the direction provided to me by the governance committee, which is to share our weekly COVID data. This is the chart that I've been requested to share. This again is a weekly comparison of where we are in terms of the active positive cases that have been reported to us by week in comparison to last year. So as you can see with the legend below, they are color coded by elementary, middle, and high school. And then the black and gray boxes are last year. So just a quick anecdote. As you can see from last year, it looks like around this time is where the total number of positives that were reported at that time might have been a peak or at some of its highest before kind of that data changing. Not sure, that would be a question for Fargo CAS and North Dakota Department of Health of if that trend's going to continue for this year and this point in time or not, but just wanted to point that out as part of my superintendent update.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Questions for Dr. Gandhi? Jennifer.
Thank you. Oops. Sorry, I think I unmuted this time. Yes. I would like to make a motion. I'd like to move that we immediately discontinue Fargo Public Schools mask mandate policy.
Is there a second?
can see.
Yes, I'll second it.
Okay, there's been a second by David. Jennifer, you made the motion. As I indicated in my email previously, this is something I'm going to work harder on, is offer the floor to the person that made the motion and go from there. So go ahead, Jennifer, and then Seth, I see your hand up. Jennifer.
Thank you. So I made, and I shared many of the data points at our last meeting, and we've heard them from numerous speakers, as well as even tonight. I think some good information was shared with us. And again, you know, just to highlight a few of their comments, when we're looking at the numbers, it's been consistently that West Fargo is significantly lower than Fargo. I think it's pretty clear across the nation, but that would be in looking at the evidence and even in our own evidence as terms of our case numbers last year and where we're at now. I just, again, we can debate that all day long. And that just proves, right, that, well, I won't even go there. But what I will say is I couldn't agree more with the comments made tonight by the parent speakers that this decision really needs to be placed back into the parents' hands. As was mentioned, if they're being used as a medical device, they are not indicated for that. They have never been shown to be effective in that, which says right on the label. And again, this is something that should be left to the parents. So it is something I think that obviously it's continually on our mind. And I think our kids are suffering enormously. And I think we don't even have any clue just how badly that that consequence will be for some children in the future. And I can tell you as a parent of young children that this creates an enormous amount of anxiety for kids. And it is a constant reminder to live in fear of people. And it is so not help beyond even whether or not you can catch the virus or not spread it. Beyond that, I think that we are not considering the profound effects that the negative consequences that this brings. And so I think, again, I make this motion because we are not doing right by our children. This is definitely not their burden to bear. They should not be wearing these masks for 7 hours a day, every day in school. We have overstepped, and I stand behind all of my comments that I've said about this over time. And I think the numbers tell. We need to put this back into the hands of the parents. Thank you.
Seth, go ahead.
Jennifer, I appreciate your passion for this issue. I really do. But we voted on this and we're going to do this every meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I would appreciate, I guess, rather than continually making a motion that is not going to pass, just so, and I'm going to say it, this is grandstanding. Jim was right last time. Because you have, as far as I know, at least to me, you've made no effort to come to us as individual board members to try and sway us so that when you do make this motion, we can have a more robust conversation about this. Because at this point now, with you making the motion and not reaching out to any of us and trying to get us to have this discussion even further, it literally is you making a motion and then talking about it. And then what I'm going to do as soon as I'm done, in the interest of parliamentary procedure, given the fact that this is going to probably be a 7-2 vote again, I'm going to call the question to order. And I like I said, I appreciate the passion, but I would say try and work on getting this to move forward rather than just making a motion so that you can speak your piece about it. And to end, I'm going to call the question to order.
First of all, process.
Is there a
procedural question? Procedural question, Rebecca, because what Seth just mentioned is actually not factual. I cannot call board members and try to sway them. That's the whole point of a public meeting. That would be a violation of public meeting law. And so I can't do that, Seth. The only opportunity for us to have this discussion is here or in committee. And I have tried time and time again. So that's our job, is to talk about it now in open session.
Seth, I want you to reiterate what you.
I'm not saying that you need to necessarily like try and sway us, but have a discussion that doesn't waste the entire board's time.
Okay,
we've discussed this. You put this motion on the floor. You put this motion on the floor.
Point of order.
Seth. Okay,
Yes.
right now Jim has requested point of order. Seth, I heard you previously call the question. Is there a second to calling the question?
Yes, I am seconding it.
Okay. Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes, sorry, I couldn't find my mute button.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Benson,
Nope.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes. Anne Marie, go ahead with the motion.
Johnson,
No.
Brian Nelson,
No,
Robin Nelson,
No.
Newman,
No.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
No.
Holden,
No.
President Knutson.
No, motion fails. On to item 5, the consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval? David?
Rebecca, I'm sorry. Since this came about as a part of Dr. Gandhi's presentation, I had my hand up regarding another thing that Dr. Gandhi had come up with. Can I
go ahead,
address that? Okay.
Sorry, David, go ahead.
My question, Dr. Gandhi, was the cultural specialist whose position we're approving today. Since I'm not part of governance, when was this position brought forward? And I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just wondering, I know that there has been a concern expressed by me and possibly by others about the numbers of administrative positions that are being added. I just wondered where was the discussion of this where did the discussion of this cultural specialist occur?
So, David, two things. One is that the position that we're offering today is a position that is a licensed teaching position on the teacher contract, not an administrative position. Secondly, it is an operational position that we are, actually it's one of the ESSER funded positions that we are approving through, and we've had some conversations both at planning around the usage of ESSER funds. Our ESSER plans are also approved online, and it ties into the DEI work that we're doing there. So that's where that is, but it is actually not an administrative position.
Rebecca, can I ask for? Okay, thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for clarifying that. Then I take it because of the fact that we are using ESSER funds, this is just a one-year contract?
Correct. All positions, all ESSER funded positions are on, or all positions are actually on a one-year contract, but all ESSER positions are funded through ESSER and subject to non-renewal on an annual basis.
And then if this position becomes valuable, which I'm thinking that it will definitely be, then we will need to find the funding to continue this on a regular contract basis in the future.
Similar to every ESSER position that we have, currently. Our goal is to utilize the federal relief funds through ESSER that we've given to create a sustainable model. We have to demonstrate a maintenance and standard of effort. So a lot of the positions that we're investing in now to address learning loss and the impact of COVID-19 on our schools, we are doing so with the mindset that hopefully that will develop the capacity we need within our existing human capital. So we don't need those positions down the road. Now, you never say never, because 3 years from now, we might realize that there's some needs that we need, but we are being very cautious and conscientious about ESSER funds being one-time funded positions. The positions are posted, it's written on their contract to indicate that they are not permanent employee positions, that they're subject to non-renewal on an annual basis. And at this point in time, the district does not have any intention to make those permanent positions. If we saw that there is a need, actually Jackie is very good at telling us if this is a permanent need in the district that is not specific to ESSER or for the next short term, then that needs to be coming out of general fund, and we're conscious to do that.
Okay, Jim, I saw your hand up, moving into the consent agenda.
Yes, I'd like to move adoption of the consent agenda with the addition of the HR addendum and the removal of item 5D for the business session.
Seth, go ahead.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the consent agenda with the addition of the HR addendum and memo 47 moved to item D in business. All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Are we okay to keep going? Nod your head if you're okay. All right. All right, we'll move on to business then. The first item is the first reading of the proposed attendance boundary changes, and it is memo 48. Dr. Gandhi, would you like to kick that off?
Sure. At our board work session this fall, we had a conversation and administration sought guidance from the board about future long-term needs for the district. Specifically, we talked about how the board would like us to prioritize several different upcoming needs of the district, as that's going to dictate what we will ultimately present in our updated long-range facilities plan, and that will also be driven by our long-range financial plan. As part of that conversation, we had shared information around Bennett this school year, starting off this school year exceeding the projected number of enrollments by RSP by a significant amount. We shared with the board that Bennett Elementary School is now, I believe, at 5 sections or 6 sections. We've added sections at kindergarten and first grade. And we've also this past year taken one of the portable classrooms that we had at Lewis and Clark that became free through the expansion of the Explore Academy there and their renovation. That was moved to Bennett, which I believe they're now using for music education. So we talked about the challenges of the enrollment there at that elementary school specifically exceeding what was projected, and the growth on the far south Fargo. So what is that going to do down the road for when we can build an elementary school? We talked about the land that we currently own, whether or not we can build on that prior to the diversion at a reasonable cost to our taxpayers because of the elevation required prior to the diversion being completed. With all that being said, administration understood the consensus of the board to bring a potential boundary recommendation that was discussed at that work session for consideration of the board. This would hopefully provide some temporary relief to Bennett Elementary School. Again, when we bring boundary recommendations, what we can share is that we don't know all the direct impact, but what we can share is based on the students that are currently geocoded in our school district as of right now, this is what we think that the numbers may be in the future, understanding that there's always movement and mobility of families as well. So that's what you have in your memo. You have a recap of the board work session. You have an outline of the boundary recommendation that was made to that was discussed and we were asked to bring forward. We didn't have a planning committee since then. And since we did have consensus at the work session, we brought this directly from administration, but we're bringing it as what we think is the board's recommendation. And additionally, governance had decided to bring this in a 2 reading process to allow for any potential feedback that board members may receive in between now and the final approval. So this memo is for the first reading of that boundary.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Robin, go ahead, and then Jim.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that the board accept the boundary scenario outlined in this memo effective for 22-23 school year as a first reading and provide for final approval at the November 9th board meeting.
Jim?
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second in regard to memo 47. Going back to you, Robin, do you have anything else to add since you made the motion?
I do not. Thank you.
Jim, do you still have your hand up? Not anymore. Okay, Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you. Bob, did this change in any way from when we discussed it at the work session? Because we were kind of throwing around a few ideas and just trying to remember if it did. Maybe you could just answer that question first.
This was the scenario that was presented at the work session.
Okay, so along those lines, there was more than one, but we're only looking at one.
Yes, this is the one that's being brought forward.
And so can you tell me the difference or why it was decided or how, on what criteria, what factor? Because this only moves 30 to 50 students, right?
Currently, in the area that's impacted by this suggestion, there are 37 students that are of elementary age. This is also a very fast growing area of town. So as more homes become built, that number will certainly increase. And we were looking at the capacity that this then would provide to Bennett to Bennett, as other portions of the Bennett catchment area will continue to grow.
So if I may clarify, so 37 students affected, not necessarily just at Bennett, but we had, if I remember right from that work session, there is close to 200, there's room at Kennedy for nearly 200 students, if I'm not mistaken, and the proximity to some of the areas you were looking at was closer than for those families to that elementary versus where they are now. So proximity, which we've always heard is a concern. So I'm wondering about that. And then if there's more students being moved, doesn't that give the district more time in terms of, because 37 students, if we're growing at 50 or more a year, it doesn't buy you much time.
So this was the scenario that we brought forward to that work session. Okay. We did discuss other options, but this is the one that we did bring forward, knowing that this area is one of the fastest growing sections of that catchment area. And by moving it from Bennett to Centennial, we would utilize the capacity at Centennial and open up room at Bennett. Also then any new growth in that area would continue to go to Centennial, where there would be still capacity available.
Any other board members have questions? Jennifer, I know your hand is still up. I'm just wondering if anyone else has questions. David, go ahead.
Fine. I have one more and then it's fine.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Dr. Gross. You just said that any new students in that area would go to Centennial, correct?
If this is approved and then the second reading would be approved by the board, yes, those boundary changes would be made.
Okay, then what area would students enter the Bennett school from? Any new students?
So on your board packet, there is a series of maps. And the map indicates in blue the catchment area for Bennett Elementary. On the second map that's in the board packet, you'll notice there is one area that is highlighted in an orange square. That is the area of our community that we are talking about right now, that right now is assigned to Bennett, but if approved by the board, would go to Centennial Elementary.
How much? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Gross.
No, so I would say the remainder that's still highlighted in blue on those maps would continue to go to Bennett.
And how much growth potential is there?
As of the 2nd of this month, because that's when we geocode the students and we can then run the different scenarios. If today those students changed boundaries, there would still be room at Bennett Elementary for about 111 more elementary age students, and at Centennial approximately 77. Now we know that that changes each month as families move in and out of our community and new homes are purchased, but that would have been as of the 2nd when we geocoded all of the students.
Okay, one more question and then I'll shut up. Are there currently portables at Bennett?
Yes.
Okay,
There
does
are
this,
two.
okay, the 103, what did you say, 103, there'd be space for 113 kids at Bennett?
Approximately 110, 111
Okay,
students.
is that counting the portables then, or is that without the portables?
Okay, it is counting the portables in that because we have music in there right now. But one option, if needed, is we'd have to put music on a cart and push into classrooms if we need to use the portable for actual classrooms.
I guess I lied. I have one more question. How do I state this? Is there potential? First of all, what is the enrollment of Bennett currently?
639 when we pulled this report.
So that's getting to be one of our larger elementaries.
It's
The
our largest.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it impractical to consider adding another 4 or 6 classrooms?
Yes. Because of gym and lunch space, we would have to expand those also if we would add more classrooms. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And now I am done. Thank you, Missy.
Yeah.
Any other board members? I'll go back to Jennifer for your question, just seeing if any other board members have questions.
Sure.
It doesn't look like it. David, you said, oh, excuse me, Tracy, you have your hand up? Okay,
Sorry,
go ahead,
I
Tracy.
don't have a button. Thank
Nope,
you.
go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Gross because I did appreciate all the detail, the new information and details that was provided in our packet. I know there have been some questions at our board session, and I appreciated all the demographic breakdown and things that was provided. So it was very informative. Thank you.
Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you. In the memo, I don't remember reading like a timeline for future building. And so that's why I'm asking about long-term, because when I'm looking at these maps, Bob, the little dot I'm assuming is where Bennett is actually physically located within the blue on the first and second map. And so if you're saying new development or kiddos moving into the district building, their families building in that area would go to Centennial, like, are we passing, how far are we going to go south and pass an elementary to go north? So I'm just trying to, in looking at both of these, I'm just trying to make sense of it all in terms of distance for families. You see what I'm saying?
I
Am
do.
I looking at the right spot, Bob?
Yeah, so as you look at the maps, you will notice that the area that we are talking about right now is further south than the physical location of Bennett Elementary. But also currently, if you'll notice, there is a section that is almost at the same southern area that is attending Centennial right now. And then also, if you look at some of our other catchment areas of other buildings, we have students who are traveling past an elementary to go to another building. So it wouldn't be unusual for some of the different catchment areas that we have designed across our system.
Any other questions? So I'm wondering what would happen between now and when we would have the second reading. Obviously, it with it being a public meeting, it gives the public information on what we would be considering for our second reading and opportunity for us to receive feedback. That's really the intent, I would imagine, between this first reading and second reading, or are we looking for some potential additional information? Dr. Gandhi, go ahead.
And Rebecca, right before I answer that question, I'll go back to one thing Jennifer asked about, just kind of timeline. What was discussed at the work session was one of our guiding principles that's in our long range facilities plan, which is that we try to build when we have 50% of the students in the new catchment area. And the tricky part of this situation is that we know that we're growing in far South Fargo, but we don't know where necessarily the next new elementary school would be. There is some land that the district currently owns. And as I mentioned, we would need some flood protection to be able to build there at a reasonable cost. If we had to look somewhere else, that would be a different encatchment area. So that's some of the things that we're dealing with. To your question about process next, Misty has just briefly mentioned and with the principal and the staff at Bennett, and that this conversation is coming to the board. Ultimately, it's a board's approval. What we would do just from the administrative lens, and Missy, feel free to chime in, is that we would probably just send a letter to some of the families at Bennett to let them know that this conversation has happened, but also direct any feedback that they have to school board members before the final approval at the next board meeting. So unless told otherwise, that would be administration's process. And then if this boundary change is approved at the next board meeting, administration would then ask for some time to develop an implementation plan. That's when we talk about things of grandfathering, things of that nature, and then we would bring that to the board for discussion at that time. However, if you do approve this at the next board meeting, you are approving it for the start of the next school year. So the only thing left to be determined at that point would be grandfathering and other components of our implementation plan, like we've done with previous boundary adjustments.
Missy, do you have anything to add? Okay, thank you. All right, I don't see any other. Jennifer, I see your hand up, and then we might be ready.
It's the last
for you,
one,
Anne-Marie.
I promise. Last one.
Go ahead.
Can I move that we move this to committee, since, as mentioned, we didn't get a chance to really talk about this at planning because our last planning meeting had to be rescheduled. And so I feel like more discussion really should take place. And I realize this is the first reading, but it really does speak also to the community by approving it prior. I know there's opportunity for discussion between the first and second, but I do think it would look better, or just be better process, if we actually had more opportunity to really ask questions in committee and look at more numbers, because I'm still struggling with the long term. When you're making a move for families, this is a really big deal. And so I want to make sure that we can confidently say we're not going to have to do it again in a year or two in the same area. So I feel like more discussion, more numbers need to be looked at before we can even say yes to a plan version 1. That's how I feel. So I can't support it for that reason. I'd rather it be in committee. And if I may make a motion to move it to committee for discussion first before we vote, I would do that.
Is there a second? I do not see a second.
I would second that, Rebecca. I'm just can that motion be made now, or does something have to be done with the first motion that's on the floor?
Anne Marie, I believe it can be made, but I might be wrong.
Jennifer, are you really moving to postpone the motion until it can go through committee?
So I believe I can make the motion to assign it to a committee. So essentially, yes, to postpone it if that would need to be the official way in the wordings. Can I do both in one motion?
Yes. So could you repeat your motion for me so we can get it down accurately?
Okay, so my motion would be to postpone this vote and move this item to committee for discussion prior to voting. You could probably leave off prior to voting, but.
And David seconded that?
Yes.
I did.
Robin and then Jim.
And Jim might answer this. So I would be curious as to when the next planning committee is, and then very interested in the timeline and how this would fall into committee versus first reading, second reading. I do agree we need some public feedback. So Jim, maybe you can answer that for me as the planning chair.
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, first of all, I don't believe this motion brings it to the planning committee because the motion said to committee. I'm assuming you meant planning committee.
Yes.
I think we need to probably get that modification in the language. The next planning meeting is November 23rd. So I believe if we did take this action, we could then theoretically have the first reading be addressed at the board meeting that same day, November 23rd. And then the second reading would happen on December 14th. Obviously, that backs us up 2 weeks if this was to be approved in terms of, the implementation plan and the communication plan. But I don't think it would be a deal breaker to take this approach. And obviously, we kind of have notified the community tonight because of this discussion. And I would assume if we take this and move it to planning, the administration may still be communicating with the Bennett community to let them know that this will more than likely be back on the agenda for November 23rd.
Okay, we're in discussion on Jennifer's motion. Jennifer, you have your hand up?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just didn't put it down. Sorry.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No problem. Anyone else have comments? Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, I would need that motion reread because I'm not quite sure if she is tabling it till the November 23rd meeting. So if Anne Marie could help out before I vote, I'd appreciate it.
I have down that the motion is to postpone the vote and move the discussion to committee.
Seth, go ahead.
I just want to say per what Jim had said too, I don't find a problem with this motion. I would just still encourage administration to, since this is the only plan right now on the table, to still reach out to those families. I don't want to postpone the families being aware of the possibility of this boundary change going through. So I would still, I don't have a problem. Like I said, I don't have a problem voting for it. I would just still encourage administration to still reach out to these families that would be affected by this specific change.
David, go ahead.
Rebecca, following up on what Jim said, could I ask that the motion be amended to state planning committee?
Anne Marie, did you incorporate planning in what you read?
I did not. It need to be an amendment. So David Paulson has moved to amend the motion to add planning before committee. or the planning committee, the planning before committee.
Yes, just at the planning committee. Thank you.
We need a second on that. Boy, I see a lot of hands up.
Second.
Seth,
I'll second that amendment.
any discussion on that amendment? Nikki? Nikki, did you have anything that you'd like to share?
No, I'm sorry. I must have bumped something. Didn't mean to have it raised.
No problem. David, did you have any other comments?
I do not. Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
Everyone's doing a good job on raising hands. Okay, it looks like we are able to vote on this most recent motion now. Go ahead, Anne Marie.
You're voting on the amendment to add planning in first.
Go ahead, sure.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Golden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
President Knutson.
Yes. Okay, that passes. Now we are on to the motion. Dr. Gandhi, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think I just want to share a few comments regarding kind of the conversation around communication piece from administration. I think it's important to know that whenever administration has been given direction from the Board of Education, we try to take that and apply that across all situations across the board, because that is our interpretation of the way that the board wants us to act. So anytime that you ask us to do something, please think about precedents as well. So we had thought that because we didn't have a planning committee, but we had board consensus at the work session to bring this option. We've talked about other options, but the consensus was to bring this option forward. We brought it to governance to do in a 2 reading process. That creates your avenue of feedback, and we would email the potential impacted families or let them know by working with the Bennett administration to do that. If you're now going to go back to your original process of putting us a planning committee, and you still want us to let the impacted families know that this conversation is still in flux, the precedents that you're creating is that moving forward, anytime that we're even just thinking about various boundary options, we should be communicating to those impacted families, hey, this option is just an option that the board is considering and you might be impacted. This is a smaller number of impacted students, although the impact to anyone going through a boundary change is the same. I would remind you of a more controversial boundary change that we went through in the last couple of years. Can you imagine if every time one of the different 9+ options were developed, if the expectation was that administration reach out to those families and that this conversation is going to happen at planning, and then you're going to have 2 board readings? What we just need guidance, because then administration is responsible for a communication piece for a board decision that's going to be made if we're creating that precedent. So not that we don't want to communicate with families, but we feel like that's what the 2 reading process does. And we don't want to create a dangerous precedent or precedents where sometimes we know that we can't brainstorm because you're a public entity and you're a public board without getting feedback, even though the feedback might not come to fruition. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Jim?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for sharing that insight. It's one I hadn't thought about. And you're right. If we think back to actually about 5 years ago when we had the task force on boundaries and they developed. So it might make more sense to wait and see what comes out of planning. If planning chooses to request it to be on the November 23rd or the December 14th board meeting, depending upon what comes out of planning on the 23rd, if this motion passes, that probably is the more appropriate time to communicate to those families.
I agree with what Dr. Gandhi and Jim have just said. Anyone else before we vote? Anne Marie, go ahead.
I just want to note that if planning is meeting on November 23rd, it would be, we wouldn't have posted that information in the agenda for that meeting prior to, so we would have to update that agenda that day. If you're tracking with me, if planning makes a decision and wanting to forward something to the board, then we would typically usually wait until that next meeting, which like Jim said would be December 14th, because we would have put out our materials on November 19th, if that makes sense.
It does. David.
Anne Marie, couldn't it not be added that day as we add an HR addendum?
You could, one of two things could happen. We could either reissue that agenda that day after planning with a recommendation, or you could add it that night. However, you know, as we talked in the past, that doesn't allow the community to know in advance, as much advance notice that you're talking about that. So yes, David, you're right, we could, just noting that for that November 23rd meeting, we would post our materials on November 19th.
My preference would be that we do this in the process where we're able to include this in with the items that are publicly noticed. Jennifer and then Robin.
Thank you. So my suggestion would be that could we just put a placeholder on the agenda for possible discussion or possible, updates in terms of this from what comes to the planning meeting. In other words, that would then be issued with the original agenda. Doesn't mean you have to make a motion or anything even on it, but it would be a placeholder.
And we have our governance committee meeting tomorrow for the November meetings. And so those of us here in this meeting today, we are well aware of that discussion. And so the motion is right now regarding moving this item to the planning committee. And I think there's lots of discussion that can take place if it assuming it passes at planning, for then how we take this farther. So we probably don't need to figure out those details tonight, but it's something important to think about. Robin?
I'm just not quite sure how to vote on this, just due to the timeline and rolling everything out to the public. I agree with Jim. I don't see any harm in postponing this 2 weeks. However, I wasn't prepared for this. So if I vote yes, I have no problem with postponing it for 2 weeks. If I vote no, it means I'm just unsure of the process with communication with the public.
David and then Brian.
I'm sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't support Jennifer's motion here. I believe I'm comfortable with what's been going on so far. I think there's going to be a first reading tonight. There'll be another second reading. Public will be able to reach out and talk to people. So that's my thoughts.
Jennifer.
Oh, I still have it up. Well, but I guess I'll ask this then. So say we voted as a first reading, that would limit our ability then, Brian, to really come back with a different option because we've approved this one. So that limits then the discussion in terms of maybe there's a better option, and we really didn't, we didn't have an opportunity to talk through that at committee.
Robin, go ahead.
Is there a possibility to plan a planning committee sooner than November 23rd?
Jim? Is there ability to meet sooner?
That's an impossible question for me to answer without being able to check with several people, most of whom are on the screen right now. It is possible. But I, much like Brian, am not really sure what more we're going to accomplish at planning. We did look at this at our work session, and I thought we did have board consensus to move forward with actually this boundary change. But if this motion passes, I'll certainly work with the administration to see if we can move the planning meeting up earlier, because the last thing I really want to do is go to Anne Marie on November 23rd and say, I'd like to add something to the agenda, because that's just kind of against my rules. She needs that prior to get it put into the packet and get sent it out. So yes, if this motion passes, I'm going to work to see if we can meet earlier than the 23rd, but currently that is our date.
Dr. Gandhi, go ahead.
I understand the value of discussion at planning, but if it's to do a deeper data dive or more information that you seek, I can commit to Bob, Missy, and I being very responsive to any requests board members may have between now and the second reading, should you choose to go the original route, to provide any additional information you need regarding this boundary change. So I just want to make sure that offer's clear. You can reach out to us at any time. We do take pride in trying to be as responsive as we can. We understand that you have important decisions to make as well. And also just, again, if things were to change between now and the second reading, approving a first reading but not approving the second reading does not mean that that action passes. It has to pass both readings. So just a reminder of that as well.
Anne Marie, could you please restate the motion?
Yes, the motion on the floor is to postpone the vote and move the discussion to the planning committee.
Thank you. I do not see any other hands up, so let's go ahead and vote.
Robin Nelson,
No.
Newman. No. Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
No.
Holden,
No.
Johnson,
No.
Brian Nelson,
No.
President Knudsen.
No, motion fails. So we are back to the original motion, which is the motion that is on the memo. Is there any discussion on the original motion? Brian, go ahead.
My thought here, like I said before, the reason why I voted no is because I know there's an opportunity to have two readings here. So after the first reading, if this one passes, obviously another one needs to happen. And if there's some information we're overlooking or the administration's overlooking, or if the public tells us something brilliant, we can change the course and not have that second reading and work. So I'm comfortable with the timeline.
Sorry.
Jennifer?
Thank you. So I guess I would say one last thing. We discussed it at the work session, yes, but we did not have numbers in front of us. And so the public never got to see anything pulled together other than this tonight. They heard us discuss it, but they didn't get to see any sort of demographic numbers. And the likelihood of it changing if you approve this one plan as a first reading, it just, I mean, it's generally historically, it doesn't always work out that way typically, but and is met with lots of resistance. So that's why I just feel like tonight I expected to have more than one thing to look at, and to have a healthy discussion about you know, the pros and cons to each one, and we didn't have that. So that's my recollection of how that discussion went at the work session, because we wanted numbers, and it was really hard to show favoritism to one or over the other without being able to see all the numbers. So that's why I'm still puzzled, like why we only have one. But again, I think that it's going to be the perception of whomever you're moving that you already have made your decision because you have one map. So that's, I was trying to avoid that by allowing us to discuss it at committee. And as one committee member, I could have been flexible in those dates to move that up and have that discussion. So, but here we are. So I will not support the vote to approve this. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Anne Marie, go ahead, please. Call the roll.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Benson,
No.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
President Knudsen.
Yes, motion passes. It's 7:15. Do we need to take a 5-minute break? I see heads saying yes. Let's do that, please. We'll see you back in 5. Thank you. Ready to go, everyone? Okay, moving on the business agenda, the next item is memo 49, teacher's contract amendment. And Seth, would you like to introduce this, please?
Yep, sure. This is just the final board approval of the change to language that the board had approved us to reopen negotiations previously. It was a pretty short meeting. Nothing has changed. The wording that was approved for us to reopen negotiations on is the same exact wording that we'll be voting on this evening. So there's really nothing new to report as far as the wording goes or anything like that. So I'll just move that the board approve the agreed upon amendment to Article 9 salary, Section A, salary calculation formula, subsection 2, paragraph E, where the last sentence of paragraph E is rescinded and replaced with the following quote, "This provision shall not apply to teachers in the MA plus 45 lane with less than 20 years of experience," end quote.
Brian?
Second.
Okay, Seth, do you have anything else to add?
I do not at this time.
Okay, anyone have any questions or discussion on the motion? Jennifer? Jennifer, did you have a question?
Yes, sorry. Seth, can you clarify just so, well, for all of us and anyone else interested, this was also agreed upon with the FEA, and is there a dollar amount attached to the change?
Yes, in the packet, the dollar amount is $215,785. And I believe that I stated this previously as well. And I believe Jackie had mentioned this as well, that in the budget that we approved, Jackie had already figured these numbers into the budget that we had approved.
Sorry,
I hope that answers your question.
Well, kind of, if I could just clarify, I guess, my question, and that is the 215, is that just for like a one-time expense or is it year over year?
That I would ask Jackie about, I believe. Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
Go ahead, Jackie.
That would be a continuing expense because those teachers would be placed at that salary level, which would continue on then.
Yep. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.
Jim, I saw you had your hand up. Are you? Nothing? Okay. All right. Anne Marie, go ahead and call the roll.
Wilson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes, motion passes. The next item, memo 50, is amendment of continuing disclosure certificate for limited tax refunding bonds, series 2012. That comes to us from Jackie Gapp. Jackie, go ahead.
Yes, this is really just a housekeeping item that we would like you to consider for approval. We have one bond that has a different continuing disclosure date than the other bonds that we carry, and we would just like to get them all on a 365-day required notice. And really what happens at that point in time is we have to submit our audit report to bondholders and just ensure that we have upheld our end of the bond agreements.
Thank you, Jackie. Jim, and then Tracy.
Yes, as Jackie said, this is really basic housekeeping. We have one odd duck bond that has a different date requirement currently. And assuming we pass this motion, it will come in sync with the rest of the bonds, which will make the requirement of doing these continuing disclosures a little less work in our business services department. So with that, I'd like to move that we authorize the attached amendment and restated continuing disclosure certificate for the limited tax refunding bonds, Series 2012, by adopting the attached resolution as outlined in Memo 50.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Second.
Jim, anything else to add right now?
No, not at this time.
Any other board members have questions? Okay, Anne Marie, go ahead.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
President Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. The last item under business is Memo 47. It was moved from the consent agenda to business. It is GP 6, 8, 11, 12, 13, and 14 monitoring document. Jennifer, you requested this to be moved. Go ahead.
I did, thank you. So the reason that I did is because I know that obviously it'll be discussed at governance, but as a non-committee member, typically since the change to our policy that we're not really allowed unless invited to speak. So I figured I would just share my comments here because there are comments around efforts to further silence opinions of those that disagree with, in this particular case, 7 other board members, but next time the role might be different. I ask you to consider that when you're looking at this language, because if you're only considering one time, you're not really thinking about long-term and the consequences the unintended consequences that it might provide. But most importantly, what I would like to say is some of the wording in there, some of the suggestions suggest not allowing a board member to participate in board meetings. And I just want you to know that is illegal. The only way in North Dakota to remove a board member is A, through recall, or B, the governor. So those suggestions are not only totally uncalled for, because much as the president of this board stated in the beginning of this meeting, we are all elected. We are all here to represent constituents in this community. And so for you to say that a board member is unwillfully listening to whatever your policy is, no matter how ridiculous the policy, it seems completely like outside of your authority and what the community would even want of you, to be excluding or trying to exclude, which has continued to happen over the year, and it's just escalating. And it just, I don't understand this mentality of we can't have a discussion. I don't understand it. I don't understand why that is in any way, shape, or form, why you feel some sort of personal threat and need to control the opinions of those that don't agree with you. But having said that, specifically regarding these comments made on here for suggestions and the fact that you'll be talking about it at governance, I really wanted to highlight that I don't even think it's legal. Well, I know it's not, for you to exclude an elected official from the board meeting. So I share them now because I can speak now and not necessarily at governance. So that's why I pulled it.
Thanks for the explanation, Jennifer. Go ahead, Robin.
I'd like to make a motion, and then I would like a point of information, if Jennifer could expound a little bit. I would move that we accept this GP monitoring document. And I would wait for a second, and then I have a question for Jennifer.
Seth, go ahead.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Robin, go ahead.
So please help me understand, Jennifer, where you would be excluded from participating in board meetings.
So at the very bottom of, let me just make this bigger so I can read it here. towards the bottom, it was suggested. Sorry, I should have printed this one out because now I moved pages. Before travel, Rebecca, maybe you can help me out. It was your, oh, here it is. Okay, so suggesting, it is on page number 9. There was suggested adding a 5th item to a process of addressing board member violations. If a censure, the offending board member, do you see that? Continues to repeat violations, action may be taken to limit the member's involvement in activities of the board other than those granted to the member by election to the board of outlined in North Dakota Century Code. It goes on to say such action may only be considered when the offending board member's actions are detrimental. Okay, again, well, that would be subjectivity, but to the board of the Fargo Public or Fargo School District. Examples of opportunities that could be limited include at meetings and a board member development events financed by Fargo Public Schools, not allowing them to attend chamber events, NDSBA, NSBA, annual conferences, training on the board's governing model, as well as negotiation models. This action would follow these steps, and then it goes on. So that's where I'm looking or reading.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? And we go ahead and call the roll.
Tillotson,
Would you please repeat that, Anne Marie, so I vote correctly on this? Would you please restate?
sure. The motion on the floor is to accept the GP monitoring document. So just
Okay.
accepting the document as a whole.
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. That completes our business. On to board reports, committee liaison, and correspondence reports. Brian, go ahead.
I really don't have anything to report other than to thank Anne Marie and administration for putting together our packets with all the information in there. It's very important that you do this because it helps me when I'm reading and studying things before the meeting. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
David, go ahead.
I have nothing to report, Rebecca.
All right, Jim, go ahead.
Just a couple of things. Based upon the action we took, planning will still be planning on November 23rd for our next meeting. Health Insurance Committee met last week. Just took a look at where our claim numbers are going, and we're tracking pretty much right where we anticipated. We're actually a little below in claims, so that's a good thing. But of course, the year's not out, so we might just pick up more. You never know. We kicked around, and I was not able to stay for all of the discussion. I had a conflict, but we kicked around 3 potential topics that the committee is going to be working through the course of this year. Things we could do that might impact or help hold down the future increased costs of the health plan. So more to come on that as the committee discussion dives deeper into it. One last thing I just share, and again, not casting a stone at anybody, but it occurred to me a couple of times tonight during the board meeting that maybe we haven't all done a good job of reading the board packet before we got to the meeting. So I just want to encourage you to take the time, prior to the Tuesday night meeting, to go through the board packet. And if you do have questions for administration or a committee person, planning chair, reach out to them and try to get that information so you're as prepared as possible when we come to these meetings. That's it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Nikki.
Okay, CEA did not meet in October. However, we will meet again in November. I'm also part of the MOU, the recess commission that was put together with the FEA, and we will be meeting tomorrow. And I'm very happy to say the first one went really well. So I'm looking forward to some more robust conversation tomorrow. Lots of people had different things that they wanted to bring to the table. So I'm excited to hear that. And in other news, I guess we've got the conference coming up the end of this week, the North Dakota School Boards. So yeah, that's that for now.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Thank you. Well, 'tis the season for teacher conferences for my own children. So I've really enjoyed being back in the buildings for these. And it's nice to see the dedication and hard work of our teachers and building staff. On the 18th of this month, I had my liaison visit to Discovery Middle School. I got to spend a morning there just touring around with the principal and interacting with kids and seeing learning in the classrooms. It was really special, and I enjoyed that a lot. I'm headed to Bismarck tomorrow, as I'm sure many of us are, for the 2-day NDSBA Law Seminar and Annual Conference that will take place Thursday and Friday of this week. And then I just wanted to share from the public health perspective that the COVID-19 K-12 dashboard from the Department of Health went live today. So that if you just Google like North Dakota Department of Health dashboard, you can find that. It tracks daily and active student positives and staff positive cases broken down by personnel and teacher. It's updated every day at 11 a.m. It includes cases reported from the previous day. So you can select by county, by school level, by district, even individual buildings within each district. So I'm hoping that'll be a really helpful resource for us in monitoring this. And then I just really echo Jim and Brian's comments tonight. I take a lot of time to read through every memo and all of the preparation. So thank you for your comments.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Okay, so a couple of correspondence information / questions. We have received some questions around our contract, specifically with Fargo Cass Public Health and Nursing Services, as well as Physician Services. And I haven't seen an answer be sent back yet to those. And so I would request that, if you have one tonight and want to provide it, that would be great. If not, can we, as board members, or at least myself, be included in that reply so that I also understand that information? There were a couple of questions asked tonight for specific replies. I would also request that that be sent to board members, those answers to those questions. And then as long as we're talking through some debriefing comments, the Roberts rules specifically, I would say that when you read through them, you would understand, Robert, when you call the question, the intention is not to cut off discussion. It's happening before we're even having discussion. The point is when a point or a discussion keeps being in that moment, sort of many people making the same points over and over, it's there for that intended use. I feel like this board is abusing it. So I want to note that, to just ask again, to allow the discussion to occur. And then around accusations of grandstanding, again, in Robert's rules, please avoid questioning the motives of someone, because the one thing that you're right about is I do have passion, but this is not about any sort of, this isn't a game to me. This isn't politics to me. This is about our kids. And I can't speak for the rest of you, but seriously, I'm speaking from the heart when I'm asking you to make this decision or to change this decision. So I just want to say, please refrain from making those kinds of accusations. Sorry, calling me or others names, and just have the discussion that we are supposed to have. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. So Seth and Rob and Jim, you had your hand up. Did you have something you needed to share right now?
Yes, I just wanted to let Jennifer know I did send the contract that person inquired about this morning to them. And when I get a chance, I'll forward it on to her and the rest of the board as well. So we did communicate back to that citizen.
Thank you.
Also to share, thanks to Anne Marie, when citizens speak with us and they have questions where they want to hear specifics back from us, it's a letter that's signed by me. It comes from through the works of Anne Marie that I also end up reviewing. So that will take place for the questions for tonight too. And we can share that information back with board members like you requested. Seth, go ahead.
I actually have nothing to report this evening. Thank you.
Robin.
Well, I'll make up for you, Seth. I have lots to report. Here we go. Let's see. Now I'm losing my screen here. I attended the Fargo Cass Public Health Board of meeting on October 15th. We had a wonderful report on NFP, which I forget the acronym for, but it's a maternal child health program that is producing amazing results. I attended on October 19th, the Chamber Public Policy Committee meeting. Yesterday, I had the absolute pleasure of touring the Explorer Academy with Dr. Lean. And I would describe it as a very functional building with flexible spaces. It's connected to Lewis and Clark Elementary, and it allows for a safe and dignified learning environment. The flexible spaces and furnishings with minimized triggers allow for the highly qualified staff to individualize their approaches, so each student can learn to the best of his or her ability. All students right now are currently being bused to school. So that is another service that I am sure is appreciated by our families and is required by federal requirements. Had some discussion with Dr. Lean, and he mentioned that some students have not recently been in school buildings since they were previously homebound to receive their services, since their needs could not be met in a more traditional setting. So they are shifting into more of a school traditional environment, which is very, that makes my heart happy. He is filing, excuse me, this is emotional for me. He is fielding many questions from other districts across the states about this program and its success. This program also reminds me of the warmth of the Ann Carlson Center from when I used to work there. This is a wonderful program, and I highly encourage you all to go to the ribbon cutting ceremony on Tuesday, November 16th at 6 p.m. so you can tour the facility. It's something else, gang. I think that's something we really need to be proud of. Governmental affairs update. There is a special interim session that begins on November 8th. As you are probably all aware, the primary reason for the session is to address redistricting and how to allocate ARPA dollars. The session consists of 4 remaining regular session days of gaveling in. They intend to save 1 day for any potential vetoes by the governor and to address those. The ARPA funds must be designated by the end of 2023 and spent by 2025. They are meant to, and this is very important, they are meant to supplement but not supplant current program funding. So it is best to plan for only one-time expenditures. There are a couple committees. The House and Senate has a delayed bills committee that will determine whether other items will be discussed outside of ARPA and redistricting. As it was previously mentioned, it is reasonable to expect a handful of proposals related to COVID mitigation strategies as well as CRT, as Dr. Gandhi mentioned. So we'll be watching that closely as well. There are some demonstrations that are also planned at the Capitol on November 8th. So I'm sure there will be lots of news coming from our Capitol on November 8th. Stay tuned.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Tomorrow governance meets. We are meeting virtually. So look for the link that was sent to you for that meeting, 7:30 in the morning. I will be meeting with Kim Belgard November 1st for lunch, and we will have as our main topic of discussion a little bit of a recap on how things are going with the Recess Commission, and then we will talk about agenda planning for the Salary Commission. We discussed the date for a potential first meeting, and so those of you that serve on the board and I guess administration that might be there, we're looking at a tentative date of November 15th at 4:30 p.m. She is working on finalizing the list of the folks that will be serving on the commission. It sounds like she's really close and expects to have that finalized next week. And so she will be getting back to me on that. But if you could just kind of pencil in, I guess, November 15th at 4:30. And if that date doesn't work, we talked about meeting Mondays at 4:30. So not every Monday, but generally a Monday at 4:30, maybe alternating every other week. We also talked about that well, the first date of the meeting would be set, the commission could decide when to meet, from that point forward. So we plan to also look at some of the things that worked and didn't work maybe with agenda planning for the Recess Commission and apply that to the agenda planning for the Salary Commission. If there's anything that those of you board members that are looking for information to bring to that initial meeting, let me know, because we want to work together on anything that we might be requesting of administration so that there is time to put information together. Kim said that she was going to be looking through her list of items that they might want to have. Let's see here. I guess the last thing I would like to mention is as we head out to Bismarck for the law seminar and the conference and then back home, please make sure we get there safely and that we get back home safely. And I don't know what the weather is supposed to look like on our way out and back. Please make sure you drive when it is safe to drive. And with that, we are finished. Our next meeting is November 9th at 5:30 p.m. and it is 7:50 p.m. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.